Good morning, everyone. We want to get started here as I just got told that they don't want us to get too far behind time. And I guess that last presentation was quite wonderful and got a lot of people talking. So thank you very much for coming today. And just a few words for people about myself. My name is Bridget Hayes. I am a consultant. I work out of Ottawa, and my areas of interest are strategic policy and planning in the area of adult education, workplace literacy, and skills. I had the privilege of working at the National Literacy Secretariat for 14 years, where I was responsible for the partnerships with business and labor and work with workplace literacy activities across the country. And moreover, since that time, I left the government and went to work for the Canadian Labour and Business Centre, which was a bipartite organization interested in skills and training across the country. And I got to do that till 2006, and those in the literacy field will remember the infamous September 26, 2006. Not only did literacy programs get cut, but our own got cut, which was quite fortunate for me because I ended up just becoming a consultant, and now I get to say what I want to say when I want to say it. So notwithstanding the polyprofessional suit, Mary Wiggin, I am not a public servant any longer. I also want to mention that we have interpretation today for the deaf, and as well we have someone here who will help with interpretation should people wish to get it in French. Et si on a des questions ou des points en français, nous avons une traducteur ici qui traduire votre comment, and I'll try my best to speak as well. Okay, so we will begin. Here's what I'm going to try to do this morning with you. I want to talk about two models that I think are used to develop literacy policy. That's human capital and social capital. Discuss their implications for policy advocacy and change. I would like to acknowledge Literacy Nova Scotia. They asked me to do the original research that I'm basing this presentation on, and they, in their newsletter of spring 2010, there is an article that I wrote for them on social capital. So now, first of all, I'll tell you what this isn't. This is not an expert seminar. Normally when I give a workshop, I actually know what I'm talking about. This time it's not. This is really me sharing with you my exploration of a topic that resonated with me and which I would like to present to you for consideration in terms of how we position literacy. I have been doing some reading in the area, and so I'm here to tell you what I read. I am not an economist, so some of these terms were very new to me, but I am a sociologist. And I think this is why it resonated with me, the whole notion of social capital. And so I'm going to take you a little bit on some of my journey and some of my readings that I did along the way to find out what this all meant. So first of all, you're probably wondering why we need to talk about this. So for years, let's face it, the literacy discussions revolved around the notion of human capital. We all know the story, you know. If we give people skills, the individual gets better trained, and then they can go work and Bob's your uncle, and everything's sort of taken care of there. And then I read this quote, which is from one of the literacy publications that Doug Wilms did. And they talk about literacy as a market and an industry and industry segmentation. And if you knew this and we just moved all those people from level 2 to level 3, we'd all be a happier place. And some of this was just sounding not 100%. It didn't sit 100% well with me. And in fact, Doug Wilms says, while not everyone will identify with the market approach favored by statisticians and economists, this is another perspective that educators and learners know from the inside. So yeah, we know that this stuff works, but to me, it seemed like it was only half of the story. It seemed to me there was something missing. And I really guess I had trouble believing that people are so rational, that somehow if we train people, they would just naturally just go to the next level, the next level, the next level. And I have this sense of little automatons, just doing their thing. And I've been sort of perplexed by this for some time. And when I was at the NLS, I certainly was involved in IELTS, and I'm a big supporter of IELTS. But as I said earlier, I'm talking about the dominant discourse in this country. We always do things based on IELTS. That's all we seem to know how to talk about. So I was really concerned about this rational sort of approach to things. And, I started thinking about let's say there's this government program. And if you put $2,000 away in that program, I'm the federal government, I'll give you $600 a year. And so after 18 years, you'd probably have $42,000 and change in your own money, and you would have had $8,500 of the government's money, plus all the interest. That's a lot of money. How many people have RESGs? Registered Education Savings Grants or saving programs. Yeah. 42% of Canadians have them. Now that's a program that was built on that economist approach of saying people will act rationally if you give them something rational. But only 42% of people took it up. So there must be something else in that equation that we're not quite getting, that affects people's behaviors, affects outcomes, and I think gives a context to the kind of discussions that we end up having when we talk about IELTS. So I also feel that I hear different things when I'm in programs and when I talk to learners and I talk to practitioners and even when I talk to employers. I very rarely have an employer say to me, we really, really need those level 3s. So it made me start to think about what else was out there that we could look at as an explanation of what happens in literacy programs that could complement this dominant discourse of the economic argumentation. So then I was at this conference that the Center for Literacy was sponsoring on accountability. And they had a number of action research groups that had done research on how our communities accountable, how our learners accountable, how our programs accountable. So these were this was my big aha moment. So I'm sitting there, and the first thing I hear about is the Quinte Adult Day School. Now they did a whole big project to try to figure out how can we measure, and the Ontario people know this piece, what is it? Self-management, self-development skills, which are skills that apparently people teach all the time in Ontario programs. And people say that their learners gain these skills, but there hadn't really been a way to actually measure these skills. And I'm thinking, that's part of the missing puzzle. We don't have a way to talk about these outcomes in a way that's kind of equivalent to where did you land on the assessment? Are you a level 1 or are you a level 2? So that was part one of my sort of aha moment, that if you want something to happen, then you need to be explicit. It needs to be embedded in the programs. You need to measure it, and you need to be able to say that you did it. And the fact that the Quinte Adult Day School was, explaining this to me, I was like, whoa, this is really important stuff, because I hadn't heard of others doing it in quite that way. What usually happens, it's very qualitative. It's very, they feel better, or they're happier. And, as a former public servant, going to the deputy minister and saying, you should support these programs because people are happier, just wasn't cutting it. So I think this was, aha moment number one, was to try to figure out how you could measure these gains in individuals. So we're still talking about the fact that from the individual point of view. So the second thing that happened that day was we had a presentation from somebody in northern BC. So here we have an organization that's working with a tribal council in northern BC, the Gitxsan First Nation. And they go in there saying, okay, we're going to have this literacy program, and we're going to increase our literacy skills, and that means that you'll have better opportunities for jobs, and you'll have better opportunities to be productive participants in today's economy. Except it was basically a jobless economy. There wasn't jobs in this community. There wasn't the usual arguments that we hear about literacy in existence to hang the motivation on, and also to hang the outcomes on. And what they did in this particular project was they looked at, what does it mean to be a member of that community? What does it mean to participate fully in that community? And this is where I first heard the notion of social capital in connection to literacy, was that sense of we're building capital in society as opposed to building capital in a business or in a productivity kind of a way. So the context in which individuals come together and create a society, and whether that's the workplace or whether it's a community, is more than just the sum of the individual's skills. So even if all of us here have the requisite skills, if there is not the social capital developed to let us use those skills, it doesn't exist. So for me, this was a really eye-opening kind of event. I don't usually have these things happen, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is just incredible. I think this is going to be something I should look at to try to better understand what happens in literacy programs. But from my perspective, and I do work more on the policy level, is to have other arguments than just an economic argument, and to be able to really give value to what everyone tells me happens in literacy programs, but it isn't counted, and therefore it's not valued. So that's sort of where I started from. And then I did a whole bunch of reading, which you don't want to know about. But I want to, at this point, also thank Maurice Taylor from the University of Ottawa. Those of you who know Maurice know that he is a teacher 24/7. And he sat with me, and he's a professor of adult education, and walked me through some of this stuff. So again, this is like, think of this as my first year seminar to you, and I'm making this little presentation. I'm only in first year. Okay, so OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development out of Paris, they talk about human capital as the knowledge, skills, competencies, and attributes embodied in individuals, which then helps to create the personal, social, and economic well-being. Human capital is about individuals. It's not just about economics, however, because we have what we would call human capital that produces social outcomes, level of confidence, capacity to work with others. Having some of these skills brings an individual better outcomes in their lives.